So in this segment, we're going to be talking about an op-ed by Caroline Lucas, which says neither the Labour Party or the Conservatives will face up to the truth of Brexit, which I think she's right about. There are some iffy bits in the article, which Caroline Lucas is a bit weird about, but for the most part, I think it's a pretty good op-ed. So on Monday, the 14th of January 2019, the House of Commons debated Theresa May's proposed deal to leave the EU. Hansard shows the word Brexit was mentioned in the chamber 165 times that day. Fast forward almost 4 years, and on the 24th of October 2022, ardent Brexiteer Sunak was announced by the Tory party as the next Prime Minister in a seemingly unrecognisable country. Two more Prime Ministers have come and gone. The pound crashed after a catastrophic mini-budget, shouts out Truss and Kwarteng, and the cost of living scandal is sweeping the nation. How many mentions of Brexit on that particular Monday? 2. So I get the point she's making. You could argue with a cost of living crisis, rampant strikes, an energy crisis, a Russian invasion of Ukraine, amongst other things, that Brexit should not be a priority for the government in that sense, if you're thinking about these specific things. However, that argument does not make sense given that the government are fixated on the channel crossings and other culture war issues. Had Brexit not happened, the energy crisis would probably not be as bad given the EU's internal energy market system. We would also been able to actually sanction oligarchs quicker. Inflation would be lower because we would not have as bad a staffing crisis as we have now, and food inflation would be lower as the cost of imports would be much lower. There wouldn't be any checks or paperwork needs compared to I think the 15% we're at now. So staffing and paperwork are huge problems. Domestic production would also be higher because we would have more staff to work on farms, processing centres, in the logistical aspects. The things that get all your food from the farm to the store. So I get her point. Brexit seemed like the only word on people's lips before the last general election, back in 2019, yet now, when the country is at breaking point, Westminster politicians are failing to join the blindingly obvious dots. True. Brexit has become the gigantic elephant in the room, trampling over our economy, society and environment to its heart's content. The Tories can't really talk about Brexit issues because they inflict it on us, and it would tank them as a party. Labour don't because they're targeting, quote, mortgage man. That's another video, get there. The Lib Dems, I don't know about them, why they're not doing so. Maybe they're kind of just waiting for the public view to change about Brexit, which is sad because you're meant to, as a politician, you're meant to impact the public's view, but the Lib Dems are scared, just like Labour are. The Greens do talk about it on occasion. Obviously, Caroline Lucas is now, but the Green Party are very small. In Northern Ireland, where, in the words of Fintan O'Toole, the detritus, I can't pronounce that word, of British politics washes up and lingers. Politicians don't have the luxury of ignoring Brexit, with the DUP refusing to turn up to Stormont until the protocol has been removed from the negotiated Brexit deal. Its entire government has ground to a shuddering halt, which I've covered the stuff in Stormont, I think, fairly well. I don't know. Many of the crises we face today have been exacerbated not by the protocol, as the DUP and other right-wing Conservatives would have you believe, by Brexit itself. This is an important distinction that people need to remember. The protocol is a product of Brexit. No Brexit means no protocol, means no DUP keeping Stormont closed, and unless they find some other reason to shut Stormont, which they're lunatics. And the steep economic costs of Brexit aren't limited to Northern Ireland. It's delivered a 15% less trade, stalling business investment, a 4% reduction in productivity, lower wages, trade deals which even the cabinet ministers who negotiate them are openly tearing to shreds, shouts out Big George, increasing food prices, the highest inflation in the G7, and a grave shortage of health and social care workers, and we're barely 2 years into our deal, which is terrifying. And it will only get worse from here. EU exporters will look to export elsewhere, probably within the single market, as dealing with export paperwork is a nightmare. British import checks can be a pain. Exporting to us costs them money. They will try and find other places to trade with, or at least try to. Same with EU importers. They need to do a deal with. They have to deal with EU import checks, which are way more stringent than the UK checks. So that means it's expensive to import from the UK. So they will look to other suppliers. It can get very confusing when you talk about imports and exporters. So in this context, I'm talking about UK importers facing problems and also EU importers facing problems. It's already happening. The land bridge that connected Ireland to France ran through GB. It no longer does. That in itself has lost its money because there are less lorries, using the facilities on the way from Ireland to France, or vice versa. The cafes and stuff. This isn't over yet. This is just where we've got to, really. We'll see a further loss in foreign direct investment, because why would you want to set up a business in the UK, or should I say GB really, when there is a lack of staff and expertise, but also a lack of export opportunities, unless you're going to set up a factory just for domestic production, similar to a factory we spoke about, I think it's Danish Crown, but that would be pretty small. Danish Crown are just manufacturing for the GB, for GB, not for anyone else. People voted to leave for a myriad of reasons. Some were furious the game was rigged. Some felt the status quo were failing too many of us, and they're right. Our society feels divided, unequal, and powerless. But Brexit hasn't solved those issues. She didn't talk about racism, which was weird. Maybe she's trying to heal the divide, but I think every time you talk about why Brexit got over the line, you have to mention the xenophobia. You have to mention the racism, because without that stuff, it doesn't go over the line. The problem that with the idea that the game is rigged is that the Tories rigged the game, not the EU. But she's right. Brexit has made things worse. Loss of structural funds will make things really bad for certain deprived areas of the UK. Starmer's meaningless platitude of make Brexit work simply won't cut it. Pretending that Brexit can be positive is dishonest. I don't know if he has mentioned actually that Brexit can be turned to a positive. It's playing into the hands of the government and undermining our national interests. We have to admit this is about damage limitation now. You can make it less bad, but he's put himself in a box and there's very limited options. Starmer is very scattered on what to actually do. He's trying to appeal to mortgageman who wants little to no EU alignment and changes to the Brexit deal, and talking with businesses who want closer EU alignment. A person who's torn between two objectives probably won't achieve either one, and most likely he will stumble into the win, I'll be honest. But the problem is he's trying to appeal to voters, certain voter set who don't want more EU alignment or anything really to do with the EU, versus businesses who want a lot more to do with the EU, a lot more alignment, and to make trade barriers as low as possible, and also to get more visa access. The Greens agreed at our most recent party conference that we would seek to rejoin the EU as soon as possible, as soon as the political situation is favourable and the right terms are available. This isn't something that's going to happen immediately, so there are measures we must take in the short term. There's a lot of ifs here. If the political situation is favourable and with the right terms, without describing what they actually are. So attack the other parties from ducking an issue, but to also duck the key points. It's a swing and a miss from me, I'm afraid. That's pretty much a strike one, I'll be real. That means implementing the protocol in full by building the necessary infrastructure for performing the SPS checks. It means rejoining the customs union to help undo the worst impacts of Brexit. It means signing up to a comprehensive agreement with the EU to protect human, animal and plant life. It means a speedy return to freedom of movement between the UK and the EU, and returning to the Horizon Research Programme. So all of this stuff is good. Sorting out the protocol is important. Combining it with SPS agreements will lower how many checks are needed for goods going from GB to NI, but also GB to the EU. Getting into the full customs union means no more crappy trade deals, but I think an end to customs checks. There will be a lower amount of vet checks that are carried out, but I don't think that will end with an SPS deal. You'd have to look at the Swiss EU deal to kind of figure that out. So there will be checks at the border, but way less than they are now, which will help British exporters a lot by actually fulfilling the criteria in the protocol. We should be let back into Horizon, so that ends of that saga. But I feel like she's kind of, getting freedom of movement. I don't know if the EU would give us that, both ways freedom of movement. Maybe they would. I don't know. And it means mirroring rather than diluting EU legislation that maintains higher standards on workers' rights, health and safety. The sooner Rishi Sunak and our politicians mention the B word and at least acknowledge, admit and accept the havoc is already wreaked on the economy, the sooner we can get on with undoing both the immediate and long-term damage. If they don't, the elephant will keep on trampling. It won't be the Tories that do it. It might be a second-term Labour Party or a Tory party that's been stuck in the wilderness for a while, maybe 3 elections. But it won't be Starmer. At least I doubt it will be him. He's put himself in a box. It's not just him though. It's him and his top team. Reeves, Nandy, a few others have really talked about it. Don't want any alignment with the EU. I think there's even an article. I wonder, do I have it here? Lisa Nandy warns voters any idea of reversing Brexit is a fantasy. So, the idea that it's going to be Starmer is ludicrous. It won't be her either. I know her seat's based in Wigan, in the Red Wall, where there are a lot of, Brexit supporters, and she's worried about her seat, but, the National Party comes before any individual MP seat, I'll be honest. So, she can keep spouting kind of, things that I think are xenophobic, or at least borderline xenophobic. but for the Labour Party to do it is pretty shameful. If it were down to me, she would not be a member of the shadow cabinet. She's decent on levelling up, but the stuff she says outside of that is not great. But you could say that about most Labour MPs, that they're very good at criticising the Tories, but outside of that, there's not much. And that's not you're gonna struggle to win like that. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.